Can you hear me now? All right. We're going to get started because I think we're running a little bit behind on things. Again, those who saw me a few minutes ago, Ed Lahotsky from Cheniere Energy.
I'm Darren Mort. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager for LNG at Bechtel.
What we're going to talk about is not just one case study, but a whole series of case studies, a whole series of successes that Cheniere and Bechtel have had together building LNG plants here in the United States, both a regas terminal and liquefaction trains. Don't read that. We're going to concentrate on our biggest successes, which is the Sabine Pass liquefaction plant in Cameron Parish, Louisiana. That right now is 4.5 million ton LNG trains in full operation, and in fact, it's now a sixth train under construction, and Cheniere issued notice to proceed to Bechtel just a few weeks ago. So we have 5 in operation, working very well, and 1 well on its way. All told, that plus the regas plant that we built on the same site back when we thought we'd have to import LNG and import natural gas, comes out to over $18 billion. And all the projects that have been completed were completed under budget and well ahead of schedule. At the same time, we're also building a facility over near Corpus Christi. We call it Corpus Christi Liquefaction in San Patricio County. Right now, we have 1 4.5 million ton train, very similar in design to the 6 that we're building in Sabine. Train number 2 is right now in the very ending stages of commissioning and should be making LNG fairly soon, right? Good.
Absolutely.
Okay. And we've already started construction on train 3 there at Corpus, and again, that's going very well. And all the projects, again, ahead of schedule and on budget. So what we want to talk about is how come we could do this? Why could Cheniere and Bechtel build these world-class projects in the U.S. Gulf Coast, despite all the challenges, despite of all of the problems that honestly other people have run into trying to do the same, not just LNG, but other kind of projects. So this is going to be, again, different. Darren and I are basically going to be talking to each other, trying to reminisce a little bit, and trying to maybe share with you some of what we've learned over the years with Cheniere and Bechtel. One thing I want to add to this is the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be a cheerleader, because I want other contractors to be successful. I want other owners to be successful at building these things, because I think that's good for all of us. So I'm going to let Darren speak first. Start this off.
Okay, so we'll do this as a Q&A, pretty interactive. We've got a few notes we wanted to touch on, but overall I think it will be a discussion and hopefully a demonstration of the kind of transparency and dialogue that we've been able to use to make the project successful. We'll kind of convey here on the stage today as well. So the first thing I would kick this off with is Ed, in many ways, in my eyes, is kind of the grandfather of the Cheniere LNG program. He's been involved for 16 years, all the way from regas through the early delivery of the trains on Sabine, all the way through now operational trains at Corpus Christi. So the obvious question, I think, to begin with, what's been the biggest challenge, and what is the secret success that other people can learn from?
Well, there's been a lot of challenges. At Cheniere, we call them slaying dragons that have raised their heads, and we've had to step back and understand those dragons and then eventually conquer them. I think it's hard to pick out the one that was the most difficult. I think the one that was the most difficult was getting people to believe in us, to believe in Cheniere, that little old Cheniere can do this. I mean, when I started with the company, there was, I think, only like 30 people in the whole company. We had virtually no money. We just had ideas. what helped us to succeed is basically to make sure that we had the best people working for us. You know, we tried to hire people who were smarter than us, and honestly trying to decide what we wanted to do and to do it. Not to sit around thinking about, oh, is it the best way to do it this way or that way? Should we be looking at several options and picking the right one? No, we've said this one will work, let's do it.
So why did you choose us, Ed? All the way back to the regas days, why choose Bechtel?
Well, it comes back up to that. You know, we talked to all of the contractors who I knew in my experience and I knew by reputation who could build LNG jobs. This was back when we were building the Sabine Pass regas terminal. And they all talked to us, but I think that Bechtel was the only one who really believed us, believed that we had the wherewithal, Cheniere had the wherewithal, we had the skill, we had the past experience to do this. And at the end, I think it became a matter of trust. And it wasn't necessarily Cheniere trusting Bechtel. It was Bechtel trusting Cheniere, saying, yeah, I think you guys can do this. You know, so that's why we chose them, and that's why we continue to use them over and over again as we build more and more trains. But let me ask you this, Darren. Why, in your opinion, were we successful? Why is this Cheniere-Bechtel team successful?
Yeah, and you know, there's many different aspects of this, I think, and to reinforce what Ed's already said, you know, today here on the Gulf Coast we have 6 trains in full operation, a 7th train that's going to be in service very soon, and 2 more trains under construction. So a massive program, really complex, really significant. And there's a few key components to the success, I think, and I think a big part of this is, you know, 16 years ago, Bechtel and Cheniere formed a relationship and a collaboration. And it hasn't always been easy. There's been challenges along the way, but I think that partnership and that dedication to doing the right thing for the projects every day, whatever challenges came up, made a huge difference. And I think a part of that is respecting each other's roles in this. You know, Cheniere's role, develop the project, provide the oversight, ensure that we do our job, but equally give us the space to do it. Ensure we implement our model, go forward, and execute the job to the expectations and the commitments we've made. And that sounds like a very simple, easy thing to do, but it's not the norm always. So getting the roles right and getting the right culture and team around this is really important. And then I think from the construction perspective, from the EPC perspective, I would flag 2 things principally. The first is what we call this integrated EPC. You've heard a little bit about it this morning, but it's about eliminating the interfaces. It's making sure that engineering feeds procurement in the most effective way, that procurement and engineering feed construction in the most effective way, that when we get to startup, we've engineered, procured, and built the job to support the startup in the most effective way. Again, sounds very simple, incredibly complex to do, and takes a lot of work to make sure you do it right. And the final thing I would say is in the execution. You know, we've built in Bechtel, with Cheniere's support in many ways, this capability in the last 20 years to do most of the work ourselves. It doesn't mean every little thing, but the majority of the work we do with our own people, our own craft, our own supervision in the field. And there's been a lot of discussion this morning already about modularization. Modularization is the panacea. And you know, we do a lot of modular jobs. We've been successful on a lot of modular jobs. But all of the trains we've talked about in this session so far, stick-built on the Gulf Coast with skilled, capable labor, with the right supervision and the right leadership, supported in the right way with engineering and procurement. And you can be very successful. So I'm not saying modular doesn't work, but there isn't a problem on the Gulf Coast that we're trying to fix. Yes, we can be more productive. Yes, we can feed the E&P into construction more effectively, but I think we've already demonstrated when we manage the jobs well, we have the right relationship and the right structure around them, we can deliver the kind of results you're seeing on the Cheniere program.
You know, I mentioned a few minutes ago that all the trains here, both at the Sabine Pass and Corpus Christi job, are very much similar. We talked earlier, I think, about standardization. One of the things that we really latched onto, Cheniere did, is something that Bechtel called the template. Basically, they had a standard design for a ConocoPhillips optimized cascade plant, that worked. I remember going to Darwin to take a look at that one and talking to the operators there and say, yeah, it works. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted something that works. And then when we started building the trains, yeah, we made a few mistakes in the construction and the execution. I mean, everything wasn't rosy between Bechtel and Cheniere from day one. Again, it comes down to transparency. At the beginning, as I mentioned, there was some trust, but probably not enough. Over time, though, we developed both a respect for each other and an understanding for each other, others' companies and each other's people, that in the future, the future trains, the human part of it worked well. The mechanical part, the design, we knew was going to work well. So that's the key. It wasn't not a modular plant that we built, but it was we call it replicated plant that we built. It was everyone just the same. The only time you change things is because you had to, because of the site or a change in the code or something like that. But that was basically it, or something didn't work the first time, which was very rare, actually.
I can maybe reinforce that again. We have a lot of conversations in the industry about standardization, replication. Sounds great. Very few people do it. And the point to make really is credit to Ed and his entire team. We started the first Sabine train 2011, probably, Ed, to maintain that discipline and that rigor through a large organization that best for fit for purpose, industry standards, replicate and continue, is a really difficult thing to do when everyone's got a great idea every morning. So the discipline and the control that goes into that, and then the benefits that are derived from it, both in productivity and schedule performance, and actually plant performance and capability, are incredible. So I think one of the learnings, we look at what the theme of this discussion is, where there's an opportunity to standardize, replicate, and duplicate, it's a really important characteristic in successful project execution. So Ed, you talked about the relationship.
Yeah.
How's it been?
It's been very good. I mean, there's a lot of examples where, which I won't bring up, where we've had arguments, but the arguments or disagreements have always been on a professional level. And we worked through some bad times, we worked through some issues, but when things seriously go wrong, or at least even minorly go wrong, we try to find as a team the solution. I mentioned majorly go wrong because I think a great example of that are hurricanes. We were on the U.S. Gulf Coast, and as we were building these plants over the last 17 years, our sites have been hit with or affected by no fewer than 5 hurricanes. Starting off with Katrina, which did not really hit our site. However, it did sort of make labor availability on the Louisiana coast and the U.S. Gulf Coast very difficult. In that case, Cheniere and Bechtel worked together to try to attract labor by raising salaries, by trying to even build housing for the people, temporary housing for some of the workers to come in. So we worked together on that. Just after Katrina hit was Rita, which did hit us dead on. I think just a few miles to the east of the job site. At the time that this was during the regas, we weren't building a whole lot. Basically, the only thing got blown over was a couple of porta potties. But again, what we lost were the people, the people's houses and things like that. But we worked together as a team to get over that. We helped Bechtel attract labor. We gave Bechtel and the other contractors assistance with getting things moving. Then was Ike. Now this was while we were building an expansion of train of the regas, and that was a very serious impact. Now, the interesting thing there is we had built the first phase of the regas, and we're building the second phase. We had very little damage to either to the first phase. It was built very well. The second phase had problems, but we again worked together to get over it. We were back up to full construction within 6 weeks. And then finally, and sometimes we count this as 3 hurricanes, was Harvey. Harvey hit both the Corpus Christi site very seriously. Then it circled, as many of us know, around Houston, which affected both of our headquarters seriously, and then whacked into Sabine, flooding that. So, you know, we had a good excuse there to really just hunker down and say, well, let's just add another year to the schedule, man. We can't do this. But we didn't. We found solutions to all of that. We found working together was much better than not working together. And it developed really a kinship and a team, sense of team that continues to this day. So it was hard, but I think we learned a lot from it.
Now, so part of the reason I like Ed so much is he's always so nice. So when I ask about the relationship, I think it's it's very positive. But the reality is, relationships can become strained. We've been working together for 16 years through a massive program of billions of dollars of work in a complex environment. And I would say there's definitely been times in that enduring relationship where times have been tough. And I think the takeaway from all that is just getting together and doing what's right for the job every time, and removing the emotion and removing the commercial drivers, and whatever you do that's right for the job will deliver the right result for both parties at the end of the day. And again, that takes work, I think. And you know, there's been examples, I think, in both of our organizations where certain individuals, or maybe more than a few individuals, didn't fit the culture, didn't fit in with the culture we created between our two organizations, which means they probably don't belong in that environment. If they're not willing to be transparent, if they're not willing to focus on the solutions, if they're not willing to engage the customer and represent us in the way that we know will make us successful, but they probably don't belong. So, you know, credit again to Ed and the Cheniere team for not just having a great relationship between ourselves, but working it so hard for what is now 16 years.
You know, this sounds like a big love fest here, and I'm sorry, but it hasn't been that way. I think we did talk a bit about transparency at the beginning, and that was difficult. And the example I gave in the previous was if there was a safety incident, and this was at the beginning of the liquefaction, Bechtel would just shut down. We couldn't find out just what happened. We couldn't find out what the root cause was. Cheniere was not invited to participate much in trying to solve the problem. And it was only over time, and again, only developing trust, and I guess it's a good thing to have a contractor for, 11, 12 years now, that eventually you have to do that. But the transparency, when it came for safety, we're still working through that, honestly, for some of the things. We talked about the data. And this is not necessarily Bechtel pushing back on us, but quite simply, Bechtel needs to understand what data Cheniere needs. And Cheniere needs to understand what data Bechtel can provide and in what format. It's something that I think I'm looking at a few of our people, we really got to look at in the future, not only with Bechtel, with other contractors, and get people involved to make sure that you know, we're providing this design, we're providing this construction for the eventual operation of the plant. I think that's key.
The other thing I think is important to note, you know, we in Bechtel and many of us in the organization have been with the company for many years. So people may be surprised to hear this. We weren't always known for collaboration and transparency. It wasn't necessarily our reputation around the industry, and rightfully so. I think it was not necessarily a positive, but an earned reputation. And I think over this last 5 or 6 years, and particularly in part because of the journey we've been on with Cheniere, when you get into these mega projects, which just seem to get bigger every year and more complex every year and have more facets to them, you can't be successful as an island. I think being aligned, having this one team philosophy, which sounds very fluffy but is actually very important, that's how you make these mega projects successful. And I think we've learned that very significantly over the last few years. And I would say Cheniere's been a part of that learning to help us make that transition. So I've got a question, Ed. So every time you listen to me or some of the Bechtel guys, you'll hear about integrated EPC, direct hire, self-perform, lump sum contracting. How important is all of that, or is it really just a matter of cost and schedule at the end of the day?
Well, I don't think you can do one without the other. I mean, in my view, there's two ways that a project can fail, a mega project like this. And one is having a contractor essentially with a bad plan, who doesn't either has a bad plan or doesn't execute a good plan correctly. And to be honest, I don't think it matters too much that whether you have a direct hire sort of philosophy or you subcontract. As long as it's a good plan and it works and you prove that it works. And that's what Bechtel has done. So there's more than one way to kill a cat, I guess, is the way I'm putting that. But the second way that projects fail, in my view, is an owner who tells the contractor what to do, especially micromanaging it, saying, I want 1,000 guys over there working tomorrow. That is, and telling the contractor that that's just what he's got to do. That's the wrong thing to do because, I love driving my cars, but I can't design one, and I'm not going to tell, Mercedes how to design a car. So that is another place where I've seen people fail. Don't micromanage the contractor. Pick one who knows what he's doing. Bechtel's proven that their model works and works very well. There are other models there that might work well too, but make sure that the guy knows what he's doing and let him do it. And that's the philosophy I've always had, even back when I was a contractor with KBR. Let the guys hire good people and let them do their job.
Well, I think a part of that, in fairness to Ed, is when you assign that level of responsibility and trust, there's this very significant accountability that comes with it, and we take that very, very seriously. And I can speak for Ed. He's always held us accountable where we've not lived up to expectation, and that's a really important part. It's not telling us how to do it; it's holding us to our obligations and making sure we're accountable for delivering on the commitments that we make. And I think that balance is hard to achieve, but it's a really important thing on these very significant projects. So I've got maybe, I don't know if you want to take questions from the floor as well, Ed, but I do have one that I want to make sure I ask you before we get through this is, what's the advice to others? There's a lot of developers out there, there's a lot of companies, a lot of major organizations who are looking to develop and deliver LNG projects right now. How do they do 6 trains before anyone's done one?
I think we talked about a lot of them already. Again, make sure you have a quality contract and you have quality people working on the owner's side. At one time, I think my team, which was not very big, a few hundred people on the on the Cheniere's E&C team, had over 1,200 years of experience building these things. So we hired experienced people who knew what could go wrong and knew how to do it right. We also hired a lot of young people who were willing to learn. So we're continuing to do that. The other thing that we didn't touch upon was okay, we were on time and under budget. Well, you got to be realistic with how long these things take to build and how much they cost. One of the things that really get me angry is when people come and say, I can build your LNG plant for only $250 a ton. A ton of what, And I tell them we're not buying bananas. We're building, billion-dollar projects. You have to understand what it takes to build these things in the location you have, with the design you have, with the contractor, the workforce, the technology, and everything together. And once you have a realistic schedule and a realistic cost, then you work to beat that. I think that's the right way to do it. I think it was Brady or Alistair at the beginning one says, somebody comes and says, I can build that contraption for 12 months. Well, what's the record? 14 months. So, well, why can you do that? You're going to have to prove it. So that's the other thing is really, really be realistic. Don't lowball your budget just so you can make the project go. I just read yesterday that we're celebrating the man on the moon in a couple of weeks. When they asked NASA what the budget would be to go to the moon, they got all their engineers together and contractors, and they came up with a number like in 1969 dollars, $20 billion. So they went to Congress and they asked for 40, and they got it. And because of that, they had the money to do it right. They had money to make sure that they tried several things to get it right. So you have to be realistic. Don't try to fool yourself and to fool your management that you can do things cheaper. Be honest, above all.
Perfect. So thank you very much. If everyone wants to give a big round of applause to our two speakers.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ed.
So before you all run away, we do have a couple of questions. We
Okay.
do have a couple of minutes. These could be questions about anything. Favorite color? So what we have to begin with was how transparent was data sharing between the parties to validate progress?
Say it again, I couldn't hear you.
I mean, really, how transparent was data sharing between the parties, Cheniere and Bechtel and maybe other companies, to actually validate the progress made?
I think it was not good enough. It can do better, but we're working through it. And Bechtel, when asked, and when we took the time to explain why we needed the data, I think Bechtel was much more forthcoming. So that communication has to happen too.
There's maybe one important distinction here from maybe what you would hear elsewhere. We've always delivered ahead of schedule. So when we talk about transparency of schedule, we set ourselves very aggressive targets. We're often cautious about making those targets the new baseline every time. So I think there needs to be clear alignment on what the overall plan is, but we're going to do everything we can to go out there and deliver the earliest schedule we can. And I think that's where maybe some of this true transparency can help as well. But it's got to be used responsibly. If the new target plan becomes the new stick for a customer to build you with, you're going to stop sharing the target plan. And that was never the case, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So another question, slightly different. How do you achieve standardized building techniques and then actually pass that on to the craft?
So maybe I can start with that one. I think the most important thing is we engineer everything ourselves, we work with our suppliers hand in hand, and we build everything ourselves. Yes, we have some suppliers and subcontractors, but predominantly we're designing and procuring so our craftspeople with our supervision can build it. That means you're standardizing not just for a project, but a portfolio and an entire business. So we design steel the same way everywhere in the world. We make our own pipe. We design the pipe the same way. All of this is done in a standardized way. So if you're a Bechtel superintendent or you're a Bechtel foreman, wherever you go in the world, you get what you expect to see. And that enables us to have this efficiency and have this effectiveness across the globe in our business.
Perfect, thank you. And the very final question, I guess we've got time for. So does Cheniere have key owner members in the integrated EPC team? And what generally does the project organization look like at a high level? If you were to have a meeting, who would sit at that table?
Between Bechtel and Cheniere?
Yep.
Well, we meet, and this is one of the things that we worked on, is every level. I mean, we make sure that we'd have, very often, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Darren, a Cheniere construction professional would be in the planning meetings and everything with Bechtel at the job site. So really down to the lower level. And then when we're talking about, maybe some high-level engineering decisions or contract decisions or other decisions, like me or my replacement, and Darren would be in that. So the key is to get that communication all the way down to the lowest possible level and let the decisions be made at the lowest correct level. I don't have to tell people how to design this plant. I expect my instrument engineer to do that.
And maybe just very quickly, I think an important part of that, and it was mentioned earlier this morning, having a single reality, so everyone's not kind of sitting on their sandbags or not sharing challenges or opportunities through the organization. So the CEO of my company and the CEO Ed's company will communicate regularly. They need to have the same view of reality, the same reality that the workers do in the field. And that's really important to avoid miscommunication and misconception.
Perfect. And a real final one, and this one's from me, really, a little bit self-serving. But obviously, we have a record number of owner-operators and EPCs attending this conference today, which is something that we're really happy to have, and hopefully that's going to benefit all of you. But I guess kind of one thing I brought up in the opening speech was we don't want people to kind of sit passively. We want people to kind of challenge themselves as they go through the conference and be asking the right kind of questions. So as an EPC and as an owner-operator, what would you suggest to an attendee as the kind of question or the kind of things they should be challenging themselves to do during this conference for the next 2 days?
Do you want to go first? Or?
Let me think about it. You go
Okay,
first.
so I think Ed's put it very well already. There's a lot of chatter in the industry, and Stuart Brady said it very well earlier, I think, from KBR. A lot of people have aspirations, a lot of people have great ideas, a lot of people have target things, but these jobs are brutal, absolutely brutal, complex, large, significant. So I think challenge the underlying reality, and I think Ed said it very well. How good is the plan? Where are the people coming from? Where is the strategy? How does this integrate? What are the supplier challenges out there? And I think all of us have a responsibility every day just to get into the detail as appropriate and really make sure it all hangs together. And if it doesn't, it's not real.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I mean, you have to, again, you hit the nail on the head. Get the contractor, the owner, also the vendors of the equipment. I mean, we didn't mention that. Cheniere is stuck with GE providing the compressors, with Hudson providing the air coolers. All of this, we tried to replicate not only the design, we tried to replicate the vendors. And all of that communication and all of that data, we now know very well because of that. And our operators like it too, because they have fewer spare parts. So, it goes all the way through the supply chain, it goes all the way through to the human chain to keep that communication and that transparency there.
Perfect. A big round of applause to our two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.